What defines you?
I try so hard to be normal. I sometimes worry that people consider me abnormal. Am I so regular that people see me as unusual? Or worse, as boring?
I used to think of my problems as an obstacle between me and my true self. But now I see them as a container. They limit me, but they also shape me.
We are shaped by our problems, but we are defined by our struggle.
Externally imposed identities cause internal changes which spawn new externally imposed identities. I am a reaction, reacting to reactions.
Whatever we say will merely be a part of the truth we've chosen to represent the whole.
And we may not choose the most important part.
If we even know what the most important part is.
Who we are is in the gaps.
What defines you?
I am not defined by those I stand beside, but I would not know myself without them.
We discover ourselves through our relationships with others.
As a wolf, it's easy. I'm defined by my place in the pack, and the pack is in part defined by my presence in it. But as a human, my place is unclear, and so is my pack.
It shouldn't be unclear. We work to produce things the pack needs, and the pack works to produce things we need. But our labour is commodified. Imaginary lines are drawn between us, and our colleagues in the project of reproducing society become our competitors in the race to produce profit for an external force. We don't know who we are because we exist to serve capital, and we are defined by our relationship to it.
King Kong said that. Well, I guess it's true. But if we acknowledge that we don't know who we are, there are no longer any limits to who we can become.
What defines you?
It can't be any individual aspect of me, as they're all changeable. But if the parts don't define me, neither can the whole, which is merely their sum.
People are defined by their history, their passion, and their decor. My hoard is what makes me me.
Out here I don't own anything or earn anything. My identity is inextricably tied to the things I don't have.
What defines you?
The same thing that defines anyone. Negativity. Bigfoot is mired in a culture of poverty. Theseus refuses to take self-ownership. Dragon is defined by material possessions that are not a part of our material existence. And I am not a deer. That is why the Dachshund is a blessing. The people of this planet will finally be defined by their non-existence.
Are humans negative?
Despair is the appropriate response to their miserable existence. They're either negative or stupid.
The key to great soup is being able to identify what's missing. Negativity is a part of the process. It's usually salt.
I don't care whether you see the glass as half full or half empty. They're mathematically equivalent. Pick whichever perspective gives you the drive to fill it up.
Dissatisfaction with the present can inspire hope or a misplaced nostalgia. All too often we yearn for a past that never existed, instead of fighting for a future that could.
Are humans negative?
Only about 20% of them.
Is my head pushing my tail, or is my tail pulling my head? Whether a force is positive or negative depends upon the direction in which you wish to travel.
They always seem very positive when they meet me. Negativity is a defense mechanism. People live their lives bound by imaginary chains, because to do otherwise would expose the real ones.
Those who force us to live in the dark do so out of fear that a crack of light will reveal the shadows they cast over us.
Are humans negative?
A little negativity is to be expected in a people cast to eternally search for a meaning that does not exist.
People are hard on themselves because they wish to take responsibility for their own problems. This otherwise admirable trait sometimes leads them to mistake problems they can't overcome alone for problems that cannot be overcome.
A negative you're sure of is often more comfortable than a positive that's uncertain.
Those who are happy with this world can only be so because they dismiss the possibility of fundamentally changing it. I'm negative about the world because I'm positive it can be better.
Are humans negative?
Let me tell you a story. Between two hills on an otherwise empty planet was a village. Life was hard on this desolate rock, and the villagers had to work together to produce the necessities of life. As they lived alone in the wilderness, one of the most important things they worked together on was a map. As they explored the world, they added lakes and forests and mountains and trees. In addition to these natural phenomena, they also added details that helped them to understand the world. Agreed upon facts about things like who owned what and how money worked, but also stories about how parts of the world had come to be owned and why money had to work the way it did. The map became a model, and as more detail was added, it grew bigger until each section sat on top of the part of the world it was supposed to represent. One evening, two powerful villagers who were quite happy with the way things were hatched a plan to make sure they stayed that way. As the map was so useful, it was easy to enlist the help of the other villagers to perform a magic ritual to perfect the map to the point where it had become indistinguishable from the world itself. At first, the villagers were overjoyed with the result, and how much easier the world was to navigate, and how it was overlaid with a perfect map that contained a lot of information not present in nature. But soon they realized that the map had become a prison, unable to make changes, as they couldn't distinguish between the world as it had to be and the world as they had made it. But over time, as they lived and worked within the model, memories faded until no one remembered a time before it. The map no longer prevented them from accessing their world. It was their world. And they called themselves free.
In a world that is fixed and false, stagnant and static, negativity is the necessary part of creating something new and real.
Okay, prove it. Create an identity for your free friends that's not mired in negativity.
Do people have self-ownership?
Once I've worked out who my self is, we can start talking about who owns it.
The self is an act of creation. One of the least interesting things about any piece of art is who technically owns it.
It is not an individual act of creation.
Ourselves are a product of the society in which we live.
If we exercise self-ownership in a way that damages that society,
we're also damaging ourselves.
Ownership is two binary concept to apply to a life filled with the frictions of living with others. But you can't change direction in a vacuum. Those frictions both limit our choices and make them possible.
If someone made a perfect clone of you, would you own it? Or if your consciousness was transferred into someone else's body? You don't own yourself. You own your experience of being you.
I don't know. Maybe.
but all the best things in life involve giving part of yourself away.
Do people have self-ownership?
I see it as more of a leasehold arrangement.
I don't mind if they think they do, but it's strange how quickly they move from owning themselves to owning parts of my creation that are very much not a part of their self.
Those who cling closely to the idea of self-ownership seem to be obsessed with drawing lines that they know what others can do with the selves they supposedly own.
And with using those lines to live off of the labour of others. If someone claims the idea that people should own what they produce justifies a world in which the vast majority of people do not own that which they produce, you should be suspicious of their sincerity.
King Kong said that. Well, I guess it's true. Those who stand above us treat us as bugs. They expect us to believe that our freedom is contingent on their ability to own the budge they would use to crush us.
Do people have self-ownership?
Our wealth is built on the work of thousands of previous generations. Those who toiled to clear the fields and build the roads, those who worked on ways to increase our productive capacity, and those who made all this possible by performing the indispensable task of raising the youth. And yet today, that wealth is concentrated in the hands of the few, a situation made justified by trumpety innovations of dubious worth.
What if there was a subscription service to help you to organise your subscriptions? What if during a commercial, we cut to a series of shorter commercials people have to watch if they want to find out what happens at the end of the longer one? We could call them commercial breaks. What if I get rich off government programs and use that money to obtain the power to cut government programs for people who aren't rich? What if I made 5 cheese pizza?
Okay, that last one was pretty good. But putting a cherry on top of our collective cake does not give you the right to the whole gâteau. Yet it's by this ridiculous logic that an individual who owns himself trains the right to exclude other individuals, who presumably also own themselves, from a share of the wealth that might have been produced. They deny us our share of society's riches, so that we are forced to work to increase theirs.
Vresius's refusal to take self-ownership is not negative. It's a positive acknowledgement of the fact that our self is wholly dependent on relationships we do not own, including our relationship to our past selves. What causes poverty?
In a game of musical chairs, what causes someone to end up without a seat? You might argue that they weren't fast enough, that they didn't anticipate the DJ's next move, or that they were simply unlucky, but you'd be wrong. Those reasons might explain where a particular person is standing, but the reason someone ends up without a seat is that there's not enough chairs.
To make the analogy more accurate, we need to make it slightly less sensible. It's not that there's not enough seats, it's that they're badly distributed.
And the bad distribution is by design. Their game doesn't work if everyone has enough. They want us standing so they were forced to labour for their benefit, producing then ever more comfortable chairs to earn the right to borrow a stool.
All too often we mistake effect for cause. If someone develops an addiction to comfortable shoes to cope with the blisters and calluses that come with a life of constant standing, it makes most sense to then point to that addiction as the cause of their upright status.
In the end, the cause of seatlessness is the decision not to create mechanisms that provide chairs to people who don't win one through the game. We know that it's possible to do so, but as these mechanisms already exist for some people, your performance in the game doesn't affect your ability to take a seat if your father owns a chair factory. And none of the causes of poverty cause poverty if your dad's rich.
You say Bigfoot is mired in the culture of poverty, but the conditions in which we live create our culture. You have it backwards. Besides, Bigfoot's culture can't be one of poverty.
Why?
He'll sit anywhere. What is money?
Something you can exchange for what you actually want.
What you're really exchanging is time.
Someone spent time working for you?
And in return, you give them a promise that someone else will spend time working for them in the future.
We're all endlessly trading IOUs.
Debt. Banks lend you money that only exists because they lent it to you.
A unit of measurement that's got out of hand.
They say money doesn't grow on trees, but apples do, and they can be exchanged for money. Money is just a fruit that doesn't spoil.
What's money?
Freedom. We justify an unequal system by claiming it came about as the result of free choices, while neatly ignoring the fact that the same inequality means some people's choices were freer than others.
Power. Money gives you control, and control gives you the ability to generate more money. We're all trapped in an infinite feedback loop.
Violence. Trade doesn't alter anything about the physical world. It merely determines who has the right to violently defend their ownership of it.
People say there's things money can't buy, like health and happiness, but statistically speaking, people with more money are happier and live longer. So maybe people are wrong.
What is money?
As children, our parents take care of us. They feed us, clothe us, provide us with shelter and entertainment. As we grow older, other people fill those roles. We pay them in return, but that doesn't change the fact that they're taking care of us. Money is our way of coordinating a world in which we all take care of each other.
Maybe it should be so, but we've made a monster of money. It's no longer a tool we use to coordinate the production of things people need. Instead, the production of things is a tool used to generate money. People produce those things, and as such they become a tool, subservient to their master, money.
The one thing all the different ways of looking at money agree on is that it's symbolic of a relationship between people, and it's those relationships that define Dragon. She doesn't use that hoard to extract profit and exert power over others. She uses it as a bed. She's also given it all away before, to help me, and she'd do it again if someone else needed her aid.
Someone like him.
Someone like a deer, who's coping with their chronic wasting disease by wishing for the end of the world and pretending to be a different species. You need a holiday.